I do like the videos that we were presented today earlier with the message of Senator Angara and also, of course, Secretary Honasan. You may pick up a lot of keywords there already that we're already talking about for the entire 3 days. You have digital transformation, you have digitization, blockchain, and all the other technologies that we're talking about. And maybe today I wanted to talk about the foundation of all of these, because we can be marred by many technologies. Marami dyan eh. You'll always pick from the new tech that's coming out of different parts of the world. But what is foundational to this is people. So I'm going to talk to you today about agile workforce and how this will help us. I think and I believe would really help us grow towards a digitized Philippines, or transform our organizations and have our economic recovery in the next years to come. So a bit of context: ING, of course, is in the Philippines. We were the first fully digital mobile bank in the Philippines since 2018. And globally also, we were one of the most innovative in terms of banking. And then ING is often cited as one of the boldest organizations in banking to take an agile transformation globally since 2016. And maybe a bit of background: Agile has been around in the software development industry, but ING has taken this into the next level by bringing that onto operations, onto support functions, to HR, and all the other functions within the organization. So it's more holistic as a transformation mechanism. Now, you might hear of Agile as being fast, but also today I'd like to give you a different perspective to not just Agile as fast, but also Agile as a culture of the organization. So in 2019, our largest shared services location in Manila, which services our wholesale and retail banks in Europe, in Asia, in the Philippines, also started this transformation in almost all of its departments in the Philippines: software development, operations, IT support, support functions, finance, HR, customer operations, customer support, all of those things. And then after a year in 2020, my team of Agile coaches has already onboarded or have supported more than 50% of the teams to transition to this Agile ways of working. It was a hazy year, when we did this transformation, because it's not just tackling the technology itself, although it's a very core part of it, but you're also tackling the hearts and minds of people who has to go through a transformation on how they work together, how they collaborate, how they define their targets, how they experience work in general. So agile teams are typically characterized as teams that are co-located. That's first. Working together physically in the same location, and this was 2019. Agile teams are also, number two, small, stable, and nimble, have been collaborating for a long time and have a lot of experiences and learning from each other. Sabi nga ni Secretary Honasan earlier, collaboration and learning. And then third, we're very much goal driven. So the teams have shared goals that they work together to achieve within a point in time or within their own respective targets. Now, COVID-19 came. So now we're questioning the foundation of Agile itself in the organization, which is co-location, because now people are suddenly remote. And on March 2020, and specifically Friday night of March 15, March 13, Metro Manila is put into a lockdown due to COVID-19. So it was announced on the 13th. On the 15th, it will start. The week after, no more going to the office, no more physical collaboration. We're all locked down in our own locations. Now, teams who are used to working physically now have to adapt. Now we are suddenly remote. And many of the tools that they used to work with, both technology and tactile and emails and all of those stuff, the computers and everything, it's practically gone. You have to reinvent how you now use those tools, given that you cannot see your team leader in front of you or your colleague on your side. Hindi mo na pwedeng kalabatin eh. You cannot say, hey, I want this check. That's not there anymore. So we have to rethink how we are working together as an organization, including the tools, of course, including the collaboration and all the support mechanisms around it. No more whiteboards, no more open spaces for meetings. There's a lot of things that are practically gone. Now, this is even more complicated if you imagine it to the teams that has to work through different departments. Because if you're just working with your team, of course, it's easy to just get in touch. You probably have chat groups already, if you may. But when you're working with different departments, then it becomes a lot more difficult because you don't meet them in water cooler anymore. You don't get to ride in the elevator with them and have chit chat. So practically, that's also getting blurred in a lot of ways. So the physical workspaces are gone. Practically, there was no office to speak of. So this was a bit of a complication because for Agile coaches, which is my team back then, before I start heading the transformation group, we were shocked, of course, with the events. And we had to scramble. No? So our remit as a team is, of course, to help the organization adapt to ways of working. And this time, it was very abrupt. There wasn't as much time to plan as compared to the agile transformation we had in the previous years. And we have to scramble to find ways to stabilize the way of working that went on suddenly remote. Bear in mind that even my team, we are still figuring out how we also work together. So we need to move onto it quickly so that we can support others as well. It's like rebuilding the plane in midair. Or sabi nga sa flights natin, put oxygen mask on you first so that you can help others. For us, it's the same thing and we have to do it fast. So we were wondering, what should we do? Well, we can continue executing our transformation as planned, but that isn't the most valuable thing to do at that particular moment. We can also just go with the flow and see what the urgent requests will come out from the teams with a risk that we might become short-sighted and tactical. So there was really no plan in place with a big disruption, a sudden disruption like this. And given we're agile coaches, we're expected to also adapt because we cannot teach what we do not practice. So we also have to really shift how we're looking at our strategy and our approach to the business. In a matter of day, we postponed our planned priorities and roadmaps in favor of responding to the needs of the teams in virtual environment. Now we're talking about what virtual tools are available for all 2,000 employees. What are the leadership skills that needs to be changing or adapting on this new way of working? If you're the team lead, you don't have your team anymore that you can just talk to and then you can just rally behind the target. That's no longer there. So it's a little more challenging for leaders as well. And this is also important, the third one, onboarding new staff. How do you do that in a remote setting? It's not a familiar environment anymore, both for the staff and also for the organization. And then lastly, how do you collaborate on a virtual setting? That's the challenges that we were having at that particular week when we first started getting remote. Now, we scrambled together to call it the 30-day stabilization plan. Before we can execute the transformation any further, the agile transformation, the digital transformation, if you may as well, we need to respond to the most pressing need first, which is where we are in terms of virtual collaboration. So my team of coaches were successful to recalibrate our own way of working within the team, appropriately so because, of course, what do you expect from a group of agile coaches? But this is not the most remarkable thing that surprised us. What surprised us a lot is that customer operations, our chat systems, our technology teams, software development, even IT support, our premises and facilities management, even the guards, if you may, in the building, the teams have stabilized their way of working pretty fast. It was really fast. And within that week, we were able to see already fast response from those groups. They were quick to adapt, to find ways to collaborate quickly and effectively. And then they started testing out different tools and approaches that is acceptable to the bank, of course, given of our regulatory nature, so that those teams could deliver their services timely, accurately and safely as what our customers and partners in the organization would expect out of us. So for example, so teams started leveraging existing digital tools much more than they did before. So even if, as ING, we're fully digital as a bank in the Philippines and also in Europe, we have a lot of digital products already. We're pretty much in the Philippines a starting out shared services hub where the work is usually on site. So this is a little challenging for us, even if you say, we have a lot of tools available. However, the teams were able to find ways to have fun online even. They do virtual retrospectives, they do their meetings online. And then if you're familiar with Agile teams, you're familiar with, let's say, Post-its. No? In Agile, we use it a lot. Eh. You start brainstorming ideas with Post-its, you put it on a whiteboard, you draw things up in there. But then in a virtual setting, that's no longer in place. So we had to adopt on using, let's say, PowerPoint, very basic tools that we can show on the screen and we can start talking to each other about. We even use Excel, we even use Notepad. So there was a lot of experiments going on. And this may seem a piece of cake, right, looking back. But we'll put it into context and perspective. Back then, on the first week of the quarantine, of the lockdown, I'm not sure with you, but we just don't know how to buy groceries as a very basic need. We don't even know whether we can go out and buy something from the store in 7-Eleven or in Mini Stop. So there was a lot of uncertainty back then. You don't know whether, can you order online for SM or can I go even to SM? Can I use Lazada for this? And Lazada doesn't have as much capabilities today as compared they were before. They were also quick to adapt, but at the same time, us in the society is also struggling to find ways to be able to respond to what we need given the sudden remote setting. So our teams also, by the way, have never been fully remote before. So it was also quite an uncertainty for us. What's interesting to note is that maybe in addition to the context I've shared earlier, after 3 to 6 months, and this is pretty fascinating, we found out that in the 3 to 6 months time frame that we see the KPIs, the business performance of the teams internally in terms of our service delivery, in terms of productivity, a lot of the teams actually were able to either stabilize their performance or some even increased it, which is a little fascinating because if you're suddenly remote and you don't get to talk to each other, then there must be something there that somehow affected how people are able to be more productive while looking at the ways they can collaborate at a very deliberate time. So it was quite a fascinating result that we saw there, and our employees that has to collaborate on site, on the other hand, they were able to create what we call ad hoc working groups or pop-up squads. So you see HR reaching out to another department, hey, can we work on this together rather than us in isolation? So there were the virtual water coolers now and the virtual elevator where you can have those conversations. So the teams were pretty fast and we were surprised because we were even planning for a 30-day stabilization when in fact in 1 to 2 weeks, a lot of the teams are already quite stable. Of course, there are still teams that struggled, especially the ones who, for example, did not have a stable way of working or agile way of working back in the office. And they needed some more support, I would say. So not everything, but there's a lot of teams that are able to adapt pretty quickly. So what did we realize here? We thought that Agile was a lot about the practices that we've built in being co-located. But what we found was that we were able to also build a collaborative culture that responds fast to change. Agility was built into the teams as they work together, regardless if it's physically or virtually. So physical closeness was not really the point. It was the mental and the professional closeness of the team that bands together is what matters more. We also realized that stable teams have been proven valuable. You stay around as a team for maybe 6 months to a year. However, we also found that on-demand teaming, or what we call dynamic teaming, can also work if collaboration across organization has been embedded into the culture itself. So it is also not just the goals that mattered. So we thought, just give them lofty goals, they'll work together, but then suddenly it's remote. What do you do? We realized that the workforce that we have with a strong sense of team purpose will find ways to change their methods to achieve their objectives. So this was a really big realization that we have created a culture out of the transformation, not just a set of practices that we have to go through. Now, you may ask, um, why does it matter? You know, I would say that may seem like quite a story, but then what we need to understand is that complexity is the new normal. Complexity in technology, complexity in our healthcare system, complexity in how we relate to each other, political systems, social systems, educational systems. All of these right now are encountering a lot of complexity and volatility that we all need to respond on to. That's why I congratulate the organizing team for putting this conference together, because now we're starting to have a lot more conversations about those things that matter. How do we respond? How do we leverage technology? Technology is not the point. The point is solving problems for society using the talents that we have in the organization and as a whole, in the society as a whole. So having this complexity as the new normal, you need to understand that as organizations, we need to respond fast. And for us in ING, we realize that responding in teams is the way to go. Now, if you look past this pandemic as well, you might realize that, yeah, lockdowns, later on, it will go away. Everyone has vaccines. But if you look past this pandemic, we are likely to find hybrid work becoming the norm. So if you thought working from home was messy, as what the Wall Street Journal headline would say, wait until you get to hybrid work. And we feel this is going to be impacting a lot as well in terms of collaboration, in terms of working together, because now not just the complexity of technology, tools, and collaborations is what matters. You also have to worry about scheduling. You also worry how to fill in your workspaces, even how to design your workspaces. Do you design workspaces thinking everyone will be back? If people have already enjoyed the fruits of working from home, are we able to bring them all back in the office just like that? I think there will be hybrid work to look into in the next stage of our normal, I would say. So we will find ourselves in a lot more disruption after this year. It's not just healthcare disruption. It's not just COVID and pandemic disruption. You'll see a lot of startups coming in. They've been around for a while now. You will see a lot of world problems, climate change that we need to respond to. We need our workforce to respond appropriately and respond lightning fast. Now, you might ask, okay, so sure, there will be those complexities. We'll respond. Maybe what I've seen now is a lot of the organizations in the Philippines are starting to take their agile transformation and digital transformation a lot faster. No, I'm seeing that a lot. And rightly so, because we need to have those fast response. We've seen a taste of it in the last year, but we cannot stand on the same ground in the next year by just being tactical. We need to be more strategic about it. So how can we build this into our organizations? How do we build our organizations towards agility? So let me offer three things as the last point. One, we need to rethink how we organize our organizations. It's not just a matter of bringing in experts, bringing in warm bodies. It's not about numbers game anymore in terms of the workforce. You also need to leverage those individuals to do more by putting them together in a team with strong relationships and strong sense of purpose. In this case, I would encourage organizations to start considering teams as the most basic foundation or basic unit of your organization. And not just any teams, by the way. It is also about teams with strong sense of purpose. They are purpose driven and they respond to change over following a plan and are empowered to take the lead. Now, second point, I mentioned this earlier, we need to start responding to change over following a plan. I cannot stress this a lot more because this is the biggest, I would say, the biggest challenge with agile transformations for all of the organizations I've worked with before. So I was consulting as well before I got to ING. And this is a challenge, not just here in the Philippines, not just in Southeast Asia, but globally. Why is it challenging? It's because we're very much grounded on the traditional management thinking where you design the work and then you give the work to someone who will do it for less cost and maybe scale that. But the problem you have there is now you're detaching the purpose of the work from the execution of the work. So now we have to get those teams together, look at the same purpose together, and then allow them, empower them to respond to change, like what I have mentioned earlier with the teams that we had in ING. So the traditional management thinking needs to be revisited or needs to be overhauled, I would say. You would think that the map is not the territory. Sometimes we think that this is the plan, but when we start looking it onto the ground, it's different. And we need to revisit our plans. By the way, I'm not saying don't plan. I'm just saying that planning is important. The plan is important, but you need to evolve the plan itself based on the changes that you see on the ground. And last point on this slide, I would just quote Mike Tyson here. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. In the next few years, we will get a lot more of these punches, and we need to respond to these punches rather than trying to still stick to what we have planned for before entering the ring. Now, a last point I want to make is that we need to, as leaders, and I know a lot of our attendees here in the room, I'm seeing a lot of attendees already in Zoom. I'm pretty sure we have a lot more in our Facebook Live. We need to, as leaders, as managers, grow an environment where people and teams will thrive. And this is the job of management, to manage the system, not the people. That means we need to revisit our performance management systems, our rewards and recognition systems, how we set up our office spaces, how we set up our policies, how we respond to a problem that the organization has, to customer demands. How do we organize tech and operations together? How do we organize the entire value chain? We need to rethink that and then nurture the environment so that we have an environment where teams could thrive. My last point on this slide, and I want to quote, a famous. I'm not sure if it's an author, but I'd like to quote this because there's a reason why I have a wilted flower or plant on the screen. If the flower does not bloom, and you can think of the flower as your workforce, if the flower does not bloom, fix the environment where it is planted and not the flower. Have a think about that, because often we try to go direct to the people and feel that they can do more and hit them with a lot of tasks, a lot of things, when the environment needs to be the one changing as well. So in order to have these productive teams, you need to have that environment also looked into and evolved as well to be conducive to teams. So let me leave you with this. Agility is a culture. And to borrow one of my Agile coach's words, you know that you have transformed your organization to an Agile way of working when you don't talk about Agile anymore. So I hope you have something in there from my talk today. Consider building teams, building the right environment for the teams, adopting our management styles to be conducive to those teams, and give them a strong sense of purpose so that they can respond to change rather than following a plan.